نحن أصحاب المعاني لسنا أصحاب الألفاظ. الألفاظ الجوفاء لا تجدي. انظر إلى المعنى.
And now we move to the second session, which is really laying the foundations for tomorrow's talk. So now what we're going to do, inshallah ta'ala, so you have to remember these 6 principles as we go along. You have to remember a lot of things, inshallah ta'ala. If you try to remember them as we go along, you will benefit a lot, because things will start clicking and the picture will start forming in your mind, like the jigsaw puzzle. So the 6 principles we mentioned, you've got to remember them as we go, as we continue. Now we move to part 2. Part 2 now is we want to understand Kalām, ʿIlm al-Kalām. Because as we said at the beginning, Islam is what? Islam is wahi, right? Islam is revelation. Islam is not Kalām. Islam is not fikr. Islam is not ra'i. Islam is not rational philosophical things. Islam is not an ideology. Islam is not opinion. It is wahi, revelation from the creator of the heavens and the earth. And so those things which clash with and try to undermine Islam, this wahi, then it is of types. And one of those is Kalām, ʿIlm al-Kalām. And tomorrow we will be looking at fikr, because the 20th century, the poison of the 20th century is fikr, ideology. The poison in the 2nd century of Islam was Kalām, ʿIlm al-Kalām. So if we understand the 2 centuries from 100 Hijrah, meaning from when the companions passed away to the time of the Imam Ahmad and other than them in the 3rd century, then we will learn many crucial lessons, many important lessons that we will understand from that period. And really, to be honest with you, my dear brothers and sisters, you will not truly understand Salafiyyah. You will not truly understand the methodology of the Salaf until you understand what happened in these 2 centuries. Why? Because all of the books of the Salaf that we study, the books of Imam Ahmad, the books of al-Barbahari, the books of al-Humaydi, and all of the books that were written, they were written in this time in response to Kalām and its people. In response to Kalām and its people. So we will not really truly understand the matters of Aqeedah, Allah's names, Allah's attributes, the issues of Iman, and so on and so forth, unless we go back and we understand what is it that happened in this time, and what was it that came into the Ummah, and what was it that the scholars were warning against. When we look at that, then we will have a thorough understanding of Salafiyyah, and also how to implement the methodologies, the manahij, and the usul that these scholars have preserved for us in their books. Okay, so let's begin. And the first point that we make is that when Islam spread, we found that there were other nations that were present. There were the Jews, there were the Christians, there were the Sabaeans. The Sabaeans are those people who were originally from the people to whom Ibrahim alayhi salam was sent, but they became star worshippers. They began to worship the stars. So these nations, they were present when Islam came and the lands of Islam spread, and the companions also moved to different regions, but we do not see the companions or the tabi'een even interacting with these people or taking things from these people, from these other nations. And so what happened is that these nations that were present, there used to be certain sciences and certain philosophies that were widespread in that time. The best way to help you understand what I mean is, if you look in our time, in our century, we see that that amongst the kuffar, they have certain ideas which really form the foundation of their society. One of them is Darwinism. Okay, this idea that man emerged from monkeys and in gradual steps and so on and so forth. This now is the truth to them. And if you try to bring an opinion different to that opinion in science, you will be treated as being foolish and backward and barbaric and ignorant and stupid, right? Because this now is the accepted truth according to them. So for that reason, every single scientist who works in that field, when he brings some new results, he has to interpret his results upon the assumption that the evolutionary theory is correct and the truth. If he doesn't do that, he loses his career. His research is thrown down the drain, right? So this is how it is. This is how it is now in our time. In the same way, in that time, before Islam came, in the time of, let's say, in the time of Isa alayhi salam, and before the time of Isa alayhi salam, these nations, and after the time of Isa alayhi salam, these nations, like the Jews and the Christians and the Sabaeans, the same thing happened to them. There was a man by the name of Aristotle, and you've heard of this man, you know this man. This man was probably one of the greatest thinkers, greatest philosophers to those people in that time. Just like Darwin is treated now. Darwin is from the greatest thinkers, scientists, philosophers in our time. So likewise in that time, Aristotle was someone who was held in this esteem. So he spoke about the world, the universe, nature, science, everything. He held opinions on everything. So if you were not studying his sciences, you were seen to be backward. You were seen to be stupid. You were seen to be ignorant. So what happened is that the Jews and the Christians, because they had an inferiority complex, they began to incorporate those ideas of that man. And then they began to speak about matters of belief in their books upon the language of that man, of Aristotle. So they began to speak about Allah, His names, His attributes, using the language of that man. Okay. So this is what happened to the Jews, Christians and the Sabaeans. They all inherited this language from, and this philosophy from Aristotle. Just like today, you have Muslims who go through the non-Muslim universities, they get affected by the science, and they start thinking, they start trying to turn and twist the Quran to make it fit with the evolutionary theory. Like we have this man, this deviant in England called Osama Hassan. You probably heard about him, that he came out on the media, the news, trying to say that, we can merge the Quran with the evolutionary theory, and there's no conflict between Darwinism and Islam, and the Muslims today are just backward and so on and so forth. In the same way, in that time, we see the same thing. They were trying to be, in accordance with the latest philosophy, latest idea, and then they began to speak about Allah, His names, His attributes. So amongst the Jews and amongst the Christians, there were people, they had scholars, who were speaking about Allah, His names and attributes, just like the Jahmiyyah, who came many hundreds of years afterwards. So you will find amongst the Jews and the rabbis, those who were saying that the Torah is created. That the Torah is created. There were rabbis who were saying this. And this is where Ja'ad bin Dirham, he actually took his qawl, this is where he took it from. So the point being that there were already nations who were affected by this, and they were present in the Muslim lands, in Harran, in Damascus, in all these different places. So what happened is, in the 2nd century after Hijrah, we mean after 100 Hijrah, in the time of the Tabi'een, there was a man called Ja'ad bin Dirham. You've heard his name. He was traveling to these lands. He went to Harran. He was in Damascus debating with Christians. He was debating with the Jews, rabbis and other than them. And from this, he picked up this language. This language of this man, Aristotle, which came to him through those narrations, through those nations. So what was the philosophy of this man? Aristotle, he said that everything that we see in the dunya, it is either a jism, it is either a body, or it is the attribute of a body. Meaning that everything that we see in this universe, it's either an object which has a bulk, and likewise the properties of this object. So we have, we have a pen, it has a certain color, it has a width, it has a depth, it has a height. And likewise we have things which have taste, which have smells, which have colors. So everything that's in existence is either body, a jism, or it is an arad, it is an attribute. So this is Aristotle. He says that when we look at the universe, everything, this is what it is. So Ja'ad bin Dirham, he took this kalam, he took this speech, and then he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to be different from everything. Allah cannot be like anything in the creation. This principle is correct. Is this not correct? Allah is not like the creation. But then he took something which was correct, and then he brought something which is falsehood. So from the implications of this, or from the things that he began to say, is that Allah is not a jism. Allah is not a body. Did any of the Salaf say this? Do we find this in the Quran? Do we find this in the Sunnah? Do we find any companion making this statement? Right? Why did he make this statement? And why did Jahm bin Safwan, why did he follow him in this statement? Okay, the reason is because they were trying to debate with atheists and they were trying to use the language of the atheists themselves. Is this the right way to do when you try to defend Islam? The answer is no. You cannot use the very same ideas and the language and the terminology of the people of falsehood in order to refute the people of falsehood. But that's what these people did. Ja'd bin Dirham, Jahm bin Safwan, the Mu'tazila. This is the mistake they fell into. So what did they try to do? They tried to refute the atheists and the philosophers and try to prove to them that Allah exists, but the language they used was the same language of those philosophers. Al-Jism, Al-Arad, bodies and accidents and so on and so forth. And then when they agreed to use that language, they had to stick to all of the implications of that language. So for example, what they did was they said that Allah exists, and the proof that Allah exists is that when we see in things, in bodies, we see that they have attributes. Okay? Attributes, for example, this has a color black. How did the color black get in there? The color black, did it create itself? No. Did the color black create itself? No. So what they said was that attributes need things for them to exist in. Right? So they said, how did the attribute get into that thing? Someone must have put it there. Who put that thing in there? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put that thing in there. Okay, so they're trying to use this to prove Allah exists. So then, when the philosopher said to them, okay, in your Quran, describe Allah to us. Describe Allah to us in the Quran. So they said in the Quran. So then they thought, hang on, in the Quran it says Allah is hearing, seeing, speaking, above the heaven. These are attributes. So if we, now that means our proof is incorrect, because now we've proved that Allah has created himself as well. Because anything was attributes must be created. So when the Jahmiyyah looked at the Quran and they were trying to answer the philosophers, they said, wait a minute, we have to deny all of the names and attributes and the actions of Allah in the Quran. Because we've proved to these people that Allah exists by this method must be correct. So if this method is correct, then whatever we find in the Quran, Allah's names, attributes and actions, that can't be correct. It can't be correct. It must mean something else. So this is how they brought ta'wil. Right? Oh yes, Allah, when it says Allah has ilm, it doesn't actually mean ilm, it means something else. Allah is above the throne, or does it mean Allah is above the throne, it means something else. This is where ta'wil came from, because they assumed that because we've proved that Allah exists to these people using this method, then this method has to be correct. And so therefore we have to make the Quran fit to agree with this proof. That's where this innovation came. That Allah does not have names, Allah does not have attributes, Allah does not have actions, Allah is not above the heaven, Allah will not be seen. Allah will not be seen in the hereafter. Why? Because anything that can be seen must be a body, must have a direction, so this is false. And this would invalidate our proof that we are using against those people. So now what we see is that Jahm bin Safwan and Al-Ja'd bin Dirham, they brought this principle into the deen of Islam, which is what? Allah is not a jism. Right? Allah is not a jism. This is the rock. Remember I said to you at the beginning that there is a rock that's thrown in the ocean, and that's the initial false innovation, the bid'ah, the big bid'ah at the beginning. From that bid'ah, we see the waves that come afterwards. Remember that, the example I gave at the beginning? This is what's going on. So this bid'ah entered into the religion at the hands of these people, Ja'd bin Dirham and Jahm bin Safwan. Right. Okay, now, what happened from here is that this bid'ah then moved to the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila, they then took this bid'ah. Allah is not a jism. Allah is not a body. And then they began to write in their books, they began to expand upon this innovation. And then they said, we deny Allah's attributes. We accept His names, we deny Allah's attributes. Then this bid'ah moved in the next century to the Kullabiyya. Okay, they took this innovation. But then they said, we affirm some attributes, but we cannot accept Allah has actions. Okay, then this bid'ah moved on to the Ash'ariyya in the 4th century. Right, so you understand what's happening here. As we said, look at all the principles we said at the beginning. That bid'ah comes in waves. Okay, we said ideas live longer than men. All these things, we see this is what's happening in this period. So what these people then did is that when you innovate something, you have to then innovate other principles in order to defend that original innovation. Right? Let me give you a really silly example. It's a silly example, but from this you will understand, it will make it clear to you. When someone creates a new product, let's say technology, they invent a new product, an innovation, they create a new product. You don't just create the product, you create many other services, you create many other sub-products that you need to support and aid for that initial product to function properly, right? Isn't that the case? With bid'ah it is the same. So when you see that when this bid'ah of kalam, this is what is kalam, this is the bid'ah of ilm al-Kalām. This is what is called ilm al-Kalām, to speak about Allah and His names and His attributes using the language of foreign nations. This is what is called ilm al-Kalām. This is what the Salaf condemned. This is what Imam Malik was speaking about when he said, beware of bid'ah. And it was said to him, what is the bid'ah? He said, ahlul bid'ah الذين يتكلمون في أسماء الله وصفاته وأفعاله. And those who speak about Allah and His names and His attributes with something that does not come from the Messenger and the companions. This is what they were speaking about. That's what Imam Shafi'i was speaking about when he condemned kalam, this kalam. That's what Imam Ahmad was speaking of when he condemned ilm al-Kalām, this kalam.